What's up, guys? Welcome to the Behind the Deal podcast, where we explore growth through acquisition. Whether you're a private equity fund manager looking to expand your portfolio or a business owner aiming to scale and build lasting value through acquisition, each of our episodes will break down the strategies, stories, the lessons that make acquisition one of the most powerful paths to growth. I hope you enjoy. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Behind the Deal podcast. I'm Joe Zanka, your host, co-founder, managing partner of DealGen Partners, who sponsors our show. Today, I had an awesome episode with JD Wild, also Josh Wild. JD's become a good friend of mine. Actually, I was part of his mentorship program and coaching program, and it was a 6 months strategy session. Where I met with him on a monthly basis and talked to him kind of every week about building up my goals and really kind of putting in place, what I need to attain them. And I found it incredible. I was able to accomplish some of those things just by, really focusing in on what matters and cutting out some of the noise. So the reason why, JD makes a good mentor and a great podcast guest is because he practices what he preaches. The guy's built a tremendous business. He started multiple businesses within the, a real estate ecosystem, owns, and operates tens of millions of dollars worth of real estate, does huge projects around the city of Boston. And is just, a great leader, a great teacher, and, has become a good friend of mine. And I'm grateful for that. So enjoy this episode. We kind of cover a number of different topics, but, I really enjoyed our conversation. I think you can learn a lot from a guy like JD. All right, JD, what's going on, man? Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, JD and I have known each other for probably a little over a year at this point. And I met you through, your mentorship program, which I thought was incredibly helpful for me personally. And, but I want to kind of take a step back and, before you were a mentor, before, you were even doing what you're doing now, which is kind of building, a real estate and business empire. I love a good non-traditional story, and I know a little bit about yours from, kind of law school to being a lawyer to now doing what you're doing. But I'd love if you kind of shared, how you got to where you are today, just for the audience.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Joe. So my story really starts with football. I became obsessed with football when I was a kid. Told myself I wanted to play for the Michigan Wolverines in college. And, I took that focus and that obsession and had a pretty good high school career. Went to college, played at Merrimack. I did not get an offer from Michigan, for all those wondering. When football ended for me, I kind of had this epiphany where I remember being on the field and I realized that this was the last down I was going to play football. I had some aspirations to go to NFL combines, but I knew there wasn't much legs to it. So, I knew that was the end, and it was a really kind of mind altering experience because you at that point I had dedicated roughly 16 years of my life to the sport that no longer was going to be a part of my life. So, I decided to go to law school. Largely because I'd always done well academically, but I'd never really tried. I'd never really applied myself 100%. And I still had a yearning to compete. And when football was over, I figured I could go compete academically instead of athletically. So I went to Suffolk Law, graduated summa cum laude in my class, and built a lot of confidence while I was there because, again, I had assumed that everyone was smarter than me because I hadn't really applied myself. So all those years of plasticity and genesis and building brain cells, I was certainly playing football and partying and wasn't applying myself. So I should. So I thought they were ahead of me. But what I realized was that work ethic, focus, burning desire, all of those things carried substantively more than book smarts. So, when I got to law school, a lot of the skills I developed to do well academically in college played well for me. So I had to be efficient in how I studied. I had to be efficient in how I paid attention. So, I grinded. I was 100% focused, didn't mess around. I did really well in law school. So it gave me a lot of confidence when I got out of law school to really jump into the business world. So my story really kind of started with football. And then when I was in law school, I was going out in the city. This was back in 2010. So It was right after the financial collapse. Like Millennium Tower was a hole in the ground in downtown Crossing. South Boston didn't exist. We had a pretty good pulse. We were going out, we're drinking after class. You could feel that there was a buzz that the city of Boston was about to explode, and that there was really no reason why it didn't have more to offer. So I had bought my first single family when I was 21. So before I went to law school, the year before I went to law school, I bought a single family with my girlfriend at the time, my now wife. And I wound up doing all the renovations myself. I come from a blue collar family, so I was very competent with tools and kind of my hands and could figure things out. And I realized I was pretty good at that. So throughout law school, I got a full-time job as an attorney. I was taking night classes and flipping houses at the same time. So I built a lot of confidence in that process. I realized I do multiple different execute at a high level. I got out of law school. I had a full-time corporate attorney job, and I was doing deals from my office, and eventually I made enough money to go off on my own. So 2 feet into that, and kind of the rest is history. We started off really just doing multifamilies. We were buying 3 families, got renovating them, turning those flats into condos, selling off the condos. Throughout that process, I built several other companies to kind of support it, one of which was a real estate brokerage.
Yep.
We started selling our own product. Now the Elevated Companies is a vertically integrated design build firm, and we do everything from start to scratch. So we do a lot of the legal, the permitting, the entitlement, the conveyance work. We do all the construction internally. We have our own construction company. We have our own design company, do our own interior design, and then we sell it ourselves. So really no competing interests. We can move swiftly with agility. We can kind of maneuver through municipalities and permitting. That's my main line of business. Is I'm a real estate developer. Yep. And then over time, I've started to acquire and develop other businesses as well. So
awesome, man. Well, look, I love first of all, the sports angle. I come from that world too. My sport was baseball, and just had that obsession. But then I remember feeling the same thing that you did, where you're like, wait a second, this is the last probably game I'm going to play. And I actually played a little bit after college, just in the same summer league I've been playing in, but it wasn't the same. When I was in college, you're competing with your buddies as hard as you can, and then all of a sudden that just ends, right? It's like the last strike of the game, and you're like, whoa, hold on. All right, so all those hours, are just kind of now like they're not. You have to find a way to reapply them, and it's pretty cool that you noticed, at a certain point that like, hey, if I just take that same obsession with football and I apply it to the books, and I apply it to not only just the books, but just law school in general, and you're trying to be the best at this I can possibly be. You realize like, hey, there might be, just like there were probably faster guys and stronger guys than you on the football field, you could outwork those guys. Well, there might have been, naturally more gifted minds in the law school, in law, but at the same time, you could outwork and outperform them with just applying that, obsession and relentless work ethic. And like you said, that builds confidence. When you see that, you're like, hey, it doesn't matter if, and you pointed out, and I was the same way too. Like school kind of came a little bit easy to me, but I never had to really try that hard at it, or never did until, I truly needed to. But once you realize like, I can, I know I can outwork people. I know I can, just put my head down and grind. I know I can obsess over something that I want to be. And those are all the tools I need in order to really succeed. And if I just apply some focus to that effort, I can continue to get where I want to go. No, I love the origin. So fast forward to today, like you mentioned, you're kind of building this real estate ecosystem. But I guess it starts with, this is a M&A kind of acquisitions podcast. So, it all starts with finding good deals and good opportunities. So when you're looking around the landscape of Boston, you noticed that there was going to be a boom coming at that time. And now, I think with the current real estate market, it's been a little bit more challenging, especially around the city. But when you're trying to source a new development, new acquisition opportunity in Boston, particularly maybe a condo or multifamily project, what metrics or signals or things like that are you kind of prioritizing before you, really kind of pull the trigger on something?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. So when I first started the business, and like I said, it was 2010, you could see the city was kind of exploding. Pretty early on, we started doing direct mail And what that is we were pulling lists of sellers that we thought showed an intention to sell at some point, whether that was high equity, whether that was it was sitting in an LLC, whether it was a probate lead. We would find some sort of metric off public record that we thought would suggest they might have an interest in selling. And we'd go to markets that we wanted to buy real estate. And we'd send them, tri-folded white letters, hand signed. So early on in my career, we were literally sitting in an office stuffing envelopes. And I'm talking 10,000 letters a week going out. What was wild, and I with hindsight, I wish we had capitalized on it more, was that nobody was doing that at that time. So for every 100 letters we would send, we would get 20 phone calls.
Wow.
We'd get 7 appointments, and we'd put 2 deals under contract. So we kept saying more mail. Mm-hmm. And we did really well. And I'd mentioned that I built these kind of like ancillary companies based off the demand. And one of them was a wholesale company. So at one point we had too many deals, which in today's economy is like unheard of.
Right.
Too many deals. And there were such big margins on them that we could sell them at a profit. So, we'd get a 3-family, we'd put it under agreement for $600,000 in Somerville. And somebody would say, hey, I'm looking for deals in Somerville. And we'd say, yeah, I actually have 2 under agreement. I don't really need both. I'll do one of them. Do you want to buy one off me? And you'd mark it up, and they'd buy the right to close on it off of you.
Wow.
So, we built a really big wholesale business. We were doing about 40 or 50 wholesales a year. Mm-hmm. We just kept rolling money into marketing. But as time went on, markets started to explode. The media caught wind of all these markets. We were in our first real market was South Boston. Then we went to Somerville. Then we went to East Boston. And around 2016, 17, people had caught on that those markets were all exploding. And every meeting I'd go on, someone would open a folder with 20 letters in it. And it was hard to start to kind of like pull yourself apart from them. They were all newbies. None of them knew what they were doing, but the seller didn't necessarily care. They just wanted the top dollar.
Right.
So, fortunately, by then we had a pretty successful track record, and we had built a pipeline of referrals from prior clients. If you buy a property off somebody and you develop it and they have a positive experience, they tell their friend when they're going to sell. So, as mail became less effective, it went from 100 letters to 20 responses to 1,000 letters to 20 responses to 10,000 letters to 20 responses. We started to build other pipelines of business. So we still do direct mail to this day. Mm-hmm. It is not that effective, but we do occasionally. We probably get a deal or 2 a year off direct mail still. But again, I'm sending tens of thousands of letters to get 1 or 2 deals.
Right.
We do not get a lot of developers get brokers to bring them deals. So a traditional development cycle is brokers want to bring a developer a deal so that the developer buys the property, builds it, and then the broker gets the back end listings. So essentially, instead of selling one property once, you get the front end transaction, and then you get the back end. If it's condos, you might get 6 units out of it, and you get 6 transactions. So it's a highly lucrative line of business for a broker. But other brokerages do not bring us deals because we own a brokerage, so we keep the back end. So we don't get those phone calls. So we still primarily have to source them ourselves. So it's a combination. It's direct mail. We do still get a lot of referrals. My phone rings all the time from prior sellers saying, hey, I'm going to introduce you to my friend. She's got a multifamily she's had for 30 years. She wants to sell. I told her you're a great guy. She doesn't want to bring it to market. She's going to give you a call, or can you call her? Mm-hmm. But I mean, if I'm being totally honest, Joe, that's part of the reason why the market is so tough right now, is because those deals don't happen as often. And when they do come, the margins are thinner. So it's, you got to pick which ones are worth your time, and it's gotten hard. So it's certainly volume.
Yeah. I mean, between volume and, just risk, right? And it takes a lot of discipline. There's a lot of stories, of real estate professionals who have gotten incredibly wealthy, doing this type of stuff. A lot of stories, that you'll hear from people who maybe aren't really in the game, but they've heard of other people fail, and they'll tell you the scary stories, like the horror stories. And I think that line, is a fine line of just being disciplined, like kind of between those two, right? If you do, if you're patient and go and work on the right deals and really start to understand, what it takes to get opportunities done, and what it takes to, and understanding the different dynamics of construction and permitting and all that stuff. But apply discipline to it, and not just take on any deal just because you're bored or you haven't done one in a while. You can really succeed even even if the market's slower, you're in a better position than maybe someone who's just getting started, itchy to get a deal done. They don't really understand everything they're diving into. They might be overspending, and then all of a sudden now, they're upside down on a project that's taken over a year to develop. And I'm sure, there's been some learning curves and bumps and bruises over the years, just like there has for anybody. But, that, like you said, the margins are thin, the market's tough. I'm sure it's been hard to be patient, but at the same time, it's also, the strength of your organization too, probably.
Yeah. We often talk about how, we're going to come out on the other side of this, and we're going to be grateful that we've developed the resiliency and the mindset to be able to kind of weather these storms, because inevitably these past couple of years are going to wash out a large portion of the people in the community. It's just the reality of it. Whether you're an agent and you're not making any money because there's no transactions happening, whether you're a brokerage who scaled up too quickly and has too much overhead, there's not enough transactions coming in the door, whether you're a developer who got ahead of their skis, over leveraged, underfunded. There's a large portion of the real estate community that won't make it through these times. We've completely bootstrapped the business. We have no debt. We've been patient, humble, kind of sitting on the sidelines, waiting for the right opportunities. Like you said, we don't need more practice. We're not just picking up deals to pick up deals.
Right.
And I'm constantly reminding the team that you got to have faith. You got to believe in what you're doing. There will be the back end of this curve will have a huge upswing, and the people that are still standing with the confidence, the credibility, the acumen, they're going to come in and they're going to sweep up and they're going to do really well. And I think we're well positioned for that next bull run. Absolutely.
So, being an acquisitions podcast too, when you're taking a look at a deal, think of it maybe like a large, condo development, right? You're converting an existing multifamily, or you're building something from scratch. How do you structure those opportunities? How do you decide, when to maybe JV with somebody? How do you decide when, or how do you present the opportunity to investors? Or how do you decide whether or not maybe this is just something that you guys fund yourselves? Talk to me about that dynamic, because it's something that, I think people who are sitting on the sidelines of real estate development, even buying, buildings or whatever they may be, they might just not understand, like, hey, you can still put together a $10 million deal without having $10 million. There's different ways to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what we do is small deals either get funded by us internally. So a lot of the analysis to figure out how we want to structure it. So we do not have a fund. So everything we do is kind of syndicated on a deal by deal basis.
Yep.
Which is kind of a bottleneck to our business. It's certainly, if I was to look at why during the peak of it, we weren't doing more deals when we could have, was because we didn't have unlimited capital behind us. We had to go raise the money on deal by deal. And inevitably, that's a capacity constraint, right?
Right.
So when you syndicate on a deal by deal basis, you kind of think about each deal one by one. And what that leads to is like, okay, there's a certain amount of equity that we'll fund in-house, where we don't bring on outside partners. We'll keep 100% of the equity. There's a certain raise level where, and I would say in my line of business, that's like $1 million plus. Like once you start to have to raise over $1 million or so to do the deal, you start to assess whether you want to bring on outside funds.
Mm-hmm.
In that scenario, you have two options in real estate. One is you can offer debt, where you can say, hey, I'll provide you a X return for the money over this duration, or you can offer equity, which is whether the project wins or lose, your profit's going to be determined by how the deal does over this duration. Generally speaking, our portfolio and our track record, we have a 100% track record of profitable deals and returning investor capital. So we generally prefer debt because it's cheaper. The equity that's usually given is based on our performance, and usually beating our pro formas or at least hitting them. Produces higher returns as an equity seat than it does as a debt seat. The debt is cheap for us, so we prefer to take debt. But as the deals get bigger, we're raising money for one right now where we're raising $3 million, and that's an equity seat that we're offering, because the size of that, the debt obligations become a little too high, and the risk return isn't there. So I would rather somebody go for the ride, offer them more upside, because I don't want to have a massive debt obligation looming over the deal. So for us, that's kind of our metric. Like I would say anything under $1 million, we look to really fund internally. Anything between 1 to 2.5, 3 million. We usually raise friends and family debt. So we'll go to a handful of investors that we've worked with in the past who, they could easily put up $250,000, $500,000, $750,000 and piecemeal it or have someone take it the whole seat. And then anything 3 million plus is really an equity seat in the deal.
Got it.
To your point about, if you wanted to buy a business that's a $10 million business, you don't necessarily need to have the 10% in. You could bring on an investor who does, and they could come in and put that money up and go for the ride. And their upside is often that equity seat. So if the deal sells at a 5x multiple after you grow it, they're going to make good return on their money. But if it doesn't, if it falls flat, they're obviously going for that ride as well.
Yep. So go a little deeper on the debt piece, because that's something that I've even personally tried to struggle to understand a little bit in some ways. If you're buying a building, in the goal is to either remodel it, redevelop it, or reposition it. Maybe it's just it's a building that isn't at its highest and best use today. So you don't have to really do a whole lot to the inside, but you got to change what it actually does as a function. But you're buying this building, and because of the fact that you're either redeveloping it or repositioning it, it's not cash flowing at the beginning, maybe for years or however long. Mm-hmm. And you're taking on debt to buy it. So how does that relationship work where, you might have payments that are due, but the building itself isn't actually cash flowing yet? How do you factor in that carry?
So in real estate, I'll kind of split them into two buckets. So one bucket is buy and hold acquisitions.
Yep.
And one bucket is fix to flip acquisitions, right? So on the development side, when we're bringing assets to market to sell, there's usually a finite period of time that we plan to buy the property, entitle it, build it, sell it. So in that life cycle, the capital event where all the money comes out of the deal for the investor or for the debt obligation is the exit of the project. Okay. On the buy and hold side, to your point, sometimes it's 3, 5, 7. That capital event is really determined, generally speaking, by a refinance. It could be a recapitalization, which would be instead of going to a bank and saying, hey, I want to get a new appraisal, get some juice out of the deal, you could bring in new investor money, replace older investor money with new investor money. But generally speaking, the way I've always done it is through a refinance. So on the development side, it's pretty straightforward, right? If you buy a building for $1 million, the bank, we're fully bank financed at this point. We don't use any really private money or expensive money sources. So the bank will say, hey, I'll do 75% of the acquisition. So if it's $1 million purchase, you need $250,000 in cash to close on it. And then we'll do the 100% of the construction. So in that scenario, it's pretty straightforward. We'll usually fund the $250,000 ourselves. And then we'll pay ourselves a modest interest for putting up our own capital. And then at the end of the job, the capital comes back first with a preferred interest rate on that money, and then profits get distributed thereafter. On the buy and hold side, what we generally do is, say you're buying a $1 million property and you're putting up $250,000, you don't have the $250,000. That investor will come in at a $250,000 seat, and their money comes back at a capital event. Generally speaking, the asset is not going to produce cash flow to pay back someone $250,000.
Right.
Over a 3 to 5 year period of time, you're going to add value to the property by improving units, turning over units, raising rents. And your goal is I've done it before in 2 years, but realistically it's a minimum of 3 years. But a minimum 3 year mark, ideally, you've had enough market appreciation. So the asset, just by its nature being a good buy, has grown in value. You've increased the rents, you've stabilized it, and you've decreased costs. So you've leaned out the operational expenses. And by doing so, you could have bought a building for $1 million that is now worth $2 million. And you go to refinance, the bank will say, okay, instead of making you a 75% loan on $1 million, we're going to make you a 75% loan on $2 million. So that delta of that loan balance can come out of the deal and pay back your investor plus a preferred return. So that's the general capital event. In real estate, our goal is always to try to get all of our money back that we put up plus a return on that money and be in the deal for no money. We rarely, and there's people out there that are getting high returns on multifamily holds or commercial holds. we rarely produce a ton of cash flow on our assets because we're often the second we start producing cash flow, we're refinancing, taking that money out of the deal to get our money back. And then it doesn't produce cash flow again. But as long as the asset can pay for itself and you've gotten to a point where you've gotten your money back, got your investors' money back, even a preferred return on that money, it's less of a concern that's producing cash flow as long as it's paying for itself and producing a healthy operating reserve.
Yep. And so just to clarify too, so you gave that example of like the 250 grand that you would go to somebody, to get in order to put that up. You could do that in the form of equity and or debt. You said your preferred method was debt because you have an understanding of how you're going to execute on this development play, how you're going to execute this overall transaction. So at the end, there'll be a big return within that capital event. And if someone had equity there, that investor, because you guys are going to perform and you understand the deal enough to know you're going to perform, that investor, you'd be giving away way more money because of the value you created versus coming to somebody, hey, give me 250 grand of debt today. I'll give you a 10, 12, 15%, interest over the course of 3 years. And now, that money comes back, that capital event happens. That person is walking away with a great return in the eyes of many investments, but at the same time, you guys are able to keep all the equity value that you've created. That's the difference.
That's exactly, yeah. And the debt structure is really generally only available to people with a prior performance track record because most sophisticated investors are going to say, hey, if I put up a lot of the money, why am I not sharing in the upside of the deal? And if you're not well capitalized and you don't have a strong track record, it's fair for the investor to say, hey, there's a lot of risk for me here, right? I don't want to just get my money back plus 12% and then have you get all the upside. Once I get my money back plus a return, I should stay in the deal and get that long-term upside as well. Mm-hmm. We are at a stage in our career where we've raised enough money and successfully executed on it that we can kind of pick and choose who invests and at what terms. And if people don't want that, we'll find somebody else who will. And we generally have a pretty good book of people that, understand that we're not going anywhere. I think sometimes as an investor in real estate, you look at some developers and you say, man, if things went bad, like they might just hand the keys and walk away. We run a pretty big outfit, where my name and my reputation is on a lot of stuff. Big portfolio. Like the odds of me just handing back keys and letting it fold are slim,
Right.
So it's less risk from the investor standpoint.
Absolutely. So you're someone who started a handful of businesses at least. You're someone who's also acquired businesses over the years. Talk to me about at this stage in your career, starting a business is hard. I think most of the things that you've started, there's been a real reason why you've done them. And it might fit into your ecosystem really well. And you might be able to generate, clients and everything like that pretty quickly. But at the same time, starting something from zero is pretty difficult. But it takes a certain level of sophistication to go out and buy something that exists. So where you're at today, when you're looking at like a new business opportunity, how are you looking at, hey, should I go out and acquire something that already exists? Or, do I have the opportunity to just start that myself?
So as we've evolved the elevated companies, we've kind of become a conglomerate in the sense that we have multiple different lines of business and we leverage the same internal team. So I'll use the construction company for the build out. If there's a modification to any of the sites, I'll use the management company for the ongoing asset management portion of the deal. I'll use my operations manager to help get some of the systems and the technology up and running. I'll use my executive assistant to handle a lot of the administrative stuff. So we leverage the same infrastructure across all the businesses, and it works in a way that they get familiar with kind of the big picture because it is kind of confusing. We do run several businesses. So when we're looking at new opportunities, we certainly want to make sure that they can fit into our ecosystem, right? Like if someone came to me tomorrow and was like, hey, I want to sell like a soft serve ice cream company. Right. I would go, is that something that kind of fits what we're trying to do? But if somebody came to me and said, hey, I've got this great ice cream product that's fully scalable. I just am undercapitalized. I have a good staff that want to stay on. I've got great managers. We might look at it,
Yeah.
So it's really about does the business fit our core kind of interests, like stuff that we want to be a part of?
Mm-hmm.
If it does, we'll always take a look, regardless of what stage it's at. It could be going defunct. It could be a newbie company that's undercapitalized. It could be something that's really overpriced, but we wonder if there's a negotiation that can make sense. If it's in our core interest, and that, when I say core interest, that's really construction, health, wellness, lifestyle, fitness, in that umbrella of live, work, play.
Yep.
And then if it's outside of that, like for example, ice cream, it's really what is being offered. Is it a scalable company?
Yep.
Because I mean, Joe, you look at a lot of deals that companies are only worth what you're stepping into. So if what you're stepping into has no momentum, has no leadership, doesn't have any soul, it's not really worth anything, right?
Right.
People can put numbers on prior years, but the second the leadership steps out of that business and your best staff leave, if the product's not extraordinary and there's nothing kind of value driven that the company's doing that other people aren't, there's not really a value to it, right? So that again, I mean, that's been a hard space for us too. We've been looking at a lot of businesses, and when I peel back the books, I often wonder if we could do it ourselves faster. Like if we wanted to get into this line of business, if we're in it on day one for X amount because of the compensation structure to the current ownership, is that a better return?
Right.
For ourselves, right? And that's a hard analysis. I think it really depends on the product and the people that come with it, because the people do matter. Stepping into a business with good people that want to stay on, are well employed, well paid, and the business can pay you and keep them well paid. A really sexy opportunity.
Definitely. Yeah. And you brought up something that's, interesting. Like, think about like a space that you might be interested, like HVAC, right? There are HVAC operators out there that have been doing this for 40 years, but like they're the ones that have been doing the work with like a small team. And the business is really their cell phone ringing and, from relationships that they have. So if you remove them from it, now you have to replace someone to do the work. Now you have to, is that phone ringing anymore? Because were people just hiring them because they built a business or because they have a good relationship with that guy at this point? Or there's another HVAC company that, has like scalable systems, infrastructure in place, a management team, and maybe a founder who has, they feel as though they've taken it as far as they can go by themselves. But, there's an opportunity for them to maybe put a little bit of money in their pocket today by selling a piece of it, but also scale beyond where they are now by bringing in a partner who understands the space and they can leverage their operation. So those are like two completely different opportunities, and for you guys, you've built, like you said, that there's that operational foundation that's in place. So it gives you leverage when you're looking at something to be like, well, if we just bring this in-house, we can cut some costs and leverage our existing operations and probably bring new sales to the table, depending on what the business does, pretty easily. But at the same time, it's all about just kind of taking a look and really understanding like what is this business? What is this opportunity? And then what does the person who currently owns it actually want at the end of the day? Do they just want to retire? Do they want to be a part of it any longer? Are they trying to sell something that doesn't even have a price tag on it? So each and every individual deal, I feel like has their own unique components to it that you have to look at.
Yeah. HVAC's a perfect example. Another one is the gym business. So we currently have a gym business in our portfolio, and I've been looking at several other gyms over the past few years. And that's really my desire for the second location, is to acquire another gym and move our brand there as opposed to starting from scratch. But the problem with gym businesses is when you look at them, a lot of them are owner operated. So the owner there, the owner is training, the owner is the brand. They're more boutique. There's not a lot of weightlifting gyms left. So most of these gyms are boutique kind of owner operated facilities. And if you take the owner out, the business doesn't really have much, like if there's nothing revolutionary that they're doing on the work outside, they have a great book of clients, but there's nothing to say that those clients are going to stay if the owner leaves. Right. So what you would perceive the value and what they would perceive the value are two different things. Because to them, they're like, well, I'm doing X amount in revenue. if you step in and you grow this, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to pay me back in a year or two and then be making money in perpetuity.
Right.
You're going to say, well, that statement is true. But if 40% of the people that go there now leave over that first year because they were really there because of your relationship with them, and I'm left with 60% of the business, it could take me 2 years just to get back to the valuation that I paid you at. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So I found the fitness business hard because our fitness business is an open gym concept. So we do have, recurring monthly membership, which is a fully scalable business. If you get a good manager, you get a good sales team, you get good staff, it runs itself. And anybody could step into that and grow that business with better marketing, better lead generation, better sales conversions. But if you go to a boutique studio, it's not the same analysis. If those trainers that everyone loves leaves, and that owner's not there, can you keep that business flowing? Can you grow it? I don't necessarily think so.
No, it's too risky, honestly. I mean, that is a perfect example of like this owner operator, who, again, they have the desire to sell their business because it's beneficial to them and their future, and they don't just want to give away or shut down what they've built, but that doesn't mean that there's an appetite in the market for it because of all the things you said. Like there's a real risk to, you could get into something and like these people there could be members there that haven't even paid the membership fee for, 10 years because they're just friends, right? Friends, family, you have to factor on all that stuff. And then the amount of people that leave because, the woman who's running it or person who's running it isn't, teaching classes anymore. And they're just, all right, well, I'll just go find somewhere else. So I completely get it. I think it, your example is great in the fitness space, but I think it, crosses all the different businesses that we're looking at too, and how our investors look at those things. My last question is, you're running this conglomerate, busy guy, on all fronts, family man. So, when you're not working, spending time with the family, but, we kind of met through teaching, right? And mentorship. And I think it's rare for someone like you to offer that, not only because it's like, oh, I should give away my secrets or I don't have time to do it, but you've made time within your world to do it. And, I know from experience, it's not, this massive money-making opportunity for you at the moment. So you're kind of doing it, out of pure joy and, and giving back. So how did you step into that role? Why go down that path? I'm curious, and I know the audience might be too.
So when I got into real estate, I started doing well, and I had this like burning feeling inside me that something was wrong, and I could not put a finger on it. And what I found was I was constantly getting dragged through the emotional roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship, where I was taking everything personal. I felt like I could be doing more with my career. I was frustrated with how people were talking to me and treating me. And I took everything personal. I was ego driven. I hadn't shaken that part of my existence. And in about 2015, my career had really taken off. Things were bustling and I couldn't shake that feeling. And I came across Tony Robbins content. And I've shared this story with you, Joe, as part of the coaching, but it was like the first time I had ever talked to somebody who understood what I was going through and was speaking my language. And I felt like he was speaking directly to me. And he essentially said, the reason that you feel that way is because you're tackling what's in front of you, not what you want. The reason that you feel that way is because the gap between your achievement and your potential is still so wide that on the outside, everybody thinks you're doing well because they see your achievement, but you know that your potential is greater than that. And the solution to this, the answer is not look at the position in which you stand, but look at the direction in which you look. Stop looking at your feet. Stop looking at the pole in front of you and change your vision to where you want to go. In your body, the car, the snowboard, it will move with you. Mm-hmm. It on a cellular level, Joe, it just changed my life. It instantly, I recognized that that's exactly what the problem was that, I had set out when I first started this, I set out to be a developer and to build things that I could be proud of. And someday, as a grandfather, drive my kids around the city of Boston and show them how I helped shape the skyline. And I found myself brokering deals, wholesaling, sitting down with sellers who were asking me to lend them $5,000. I was all over the place and was like, I know I'm making money. I know things are going well, but this isn't who I am. This isn't where I want to be.
Right.
I found myself on the totem pole of deals getting talked down to. I found myself selling deals to people who were then, not really being grateful to me. And all of it was just kind of emotionally being built up. So on a cellular level, that changed me. I woke up the next day. I said, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to define what I want in life, and I'm going to stop staring at the things in front of me and just start 100% staring at the things that I want in life. So I started becoming obsessed with Tony Robbins, consumed all of his content. Again, this was 2015, so it wasn't widely accessible at the time. Like if you went on Spotify and looked for self-help, motivation, business acumen, there was no podcasts. Tony Robbins didn't even really have a podcast then. That's how, this was like right at the start of podcasts. So he had some guests on there, but it wasn't like a robust, it was really like Tim Ferriss. So I started going to kind of all the OGs in the space and listening to their like discs on tape, essentially, that had been uploaded to Spotify. So I got it. Wayne Dyer was one of the first people. I got into Les Brown, Zig Ziglar, Bob Proctor. And once I got into that space, I realized that there was something bigger here that no one had ever taught me, that I had never been introduced to, and that why am I just finding out about this now? So I got into meditation. I got into theta meditation and focused on increasing my vibrational frequency. I got into manifestation. And once I got into that space, I just like overnight was just obsessed. I was, reading 2 books a month, was listening to multiple podcasts a day. I was just like, oh man, I figured it out. Like this is the path. And on that journey, I discovered a lot about myself. I let go of a lot of anger that I had towards past experiences. I forgave a lot of the people that I thought did me wrong because I realized I was only punishing myself. I realized that there are no meanings to experiences. I choose the emotion I attach to the experience, and that defines the experience. And with that, I just found my life exploding, right? It was like I kind of went from like a pixelated old monitor to a high definition TV. Like everything I saw was crystal clear. I could read people and tell if they were going to be a bankrupt bank account, if they were going to take too much energy from me and not give me energy. I could read rooms. I could read business opportunities. I just started to realize what I wanted. And if it didn't align with that, it was out.
Yeah.
And my career and my life exploded. The quality of my life went through the roof. My spiritual understanding of God and the universe changed. My anxiety disappeared. My whole life changed. So I would often share this with people. People thought I was crazy. They would be like, "Oh, this guy, he just found Jesus." Like one of the. And that, in a lot of sense, it was very much that. Like I think once you have that level of faith in something bigger than you, and you understand that you're doing the right things, that you're going to get the outcomes you want, it might just take longer than you expect. That there is a very spiritual understanding to that. Yep. And I recognized how lonely it was, and I had wished I had a father or somebody in my life who was aware of this stuff, and it brought it to me at a young age. Because from a sports perspective, Joe, like if somebody had taught me how to reset as a football player and me how to like not worry about the missed tackle and go to the next play, no one ever taught me that. The coaches didn't teach us that. There was no sports science back then when I was playing. I know it's every professional team now has a sports scientist and this stuff, but back then there wasn't. It was like you missed a tackle. They did the opposite. They took you out, yelled at you, crushed your confidence. And like baseball, you get into a slump, and instead of helping you get out of the slump, it just stacked and got worse.
Yep.
When I got into the business community, to this day, I still only have a handful of people that I can geek out about this stuff with. It's certainly more robust now. You can go anywhere and find this content, and there's wellness retreats and meditation seminars everywhere. It's certainly becoming more accessible, which is great. But I still found there was a massive gap in the real life coaching mentoring space. So I had hired throughout that process, I had hired several coaches, all of which I found were trying to tell me these principles, but I could tell they weren't living them themselves. I could tell that they hadn't manifested or produced anything in their life of significance.
Sure.
I was a little bit further ahead than they were. So I struggled because I was looking for somebody that I could aspire to be, or somebody that I could bounce stuff off, and I couldn't find it. So, as part of that discovery and experience, I wanted to serve others. So I said, to increase my vibrational frequency, I certainly want to share the message. I want other people's lives to change. And if, I can get 10 people to understand these concepts, and they can get 10 people to understand them, and the world becomes a better place because the message gets shared that you don't have to live in misery and stress and fear and anxiety, and that you control all of that in your head. What an extraordinary way to kind of improve the lives of others without necessarily having to dedicate your whole life to it. So
absolutely.
That's started. And then, it just kind of grew. A lot of referrals, a lot of people would come to the gym, successful people feeling like they were kind of at that threshold. They needed somebody. And it's nice when you can sit down with a counterpart, somebody who's real life, kind of in the trenches like you, dealing with the same problems, and you don't feel like you're bouncing them off somebody who's sitting in a call center in Las Vegas doing this at scale,
Right.
Yeah, that's really the story. And, the next level of, I think, of my coaching career is small group settings. I would like to get into a little bit more of like sports and teams and kind of work with that. And there's not a ton of money in it based on the way I'm looking at it, but I would love to spread the message and be a part of other people's transformations.
I had an awesome experience with you, man. I really did. You taught me a lot, and I felt like, you were somebody that was ahead of me, in business and in experience, and, just been doing things longer too. But with what you were doing, I genuinely enjoyed the approach, because like you said, if you go to, maybe one of those more widely networked coaching practices, like, you probably get some good stuff out of it, but at the same time, you might feel as like they're always just trying to like upsell you or something. Like it's a business, and you are treating it as a part of your business system. But at the same time, it felt a lot more authentic, being like, hey, JD's doing this because like he's not you weren't never looking for anything out of me other than, to try to work on what we talked about and to try to, show up to the next meeting better than I was before. Like it wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, if I get Joe to buy in, he's gonna, spend this much money the next time. It was all just like, as you said, like, I learned this myself. I really wish I had someone teach it to me. So I'm going to go out and spread, all the things like, I've invested the time, I've invested the money, I've invested everything into learning as much as I can about this. And now I'm just, I just really want to spread it and make people's lives better. And, when you hear that, like you said, like, when you first started telling people about it, they were like, oh, he found Jesus or whatever. But at the same time, it might be just one of those things where it's like, oh, it sounds like a little gimmicky. But then when you practice it with you, it really was like exactly that. Like, it was like, hey man, I'm living this right now, and I have proof that I'm living this right now, and you can too. And I'm going to just help guide you that direction. So it's been helpful for me, this, even since we started coaching, like I bought a home for my family, something that I was struggling with just because of, the real estate market and everything like that, in a location that we love, that we're enjoying. My business is definitely doing better since I started working together, and, I'm personally making more money, investing, with better habits. So yeah, I'm kind of living it too. And I think, I want to keep getting better at it and continue to, staying in your network. And, I know we've talked a little bit about it too, but like those group setting things sound awesome. Just building more of a community of people that are like-minded. It's a lonely journey, this entrepreneurial thing. And even though you might have people around you that are working for you, working with you, like there's not a lot of people you can talk to, when you're in the trenches, and it's good to find those people.
Yeah. I would say that it's probably the hardest part about entrepreneurship is you often feel like you're in the wrong room, right? Like everyone's at a cookout trying to enjoy themselves, and you're thinking about, the meeting you had earlier that day that went south, or like,
yeah.
You have some sort of family obligation, or your wife set up dinner with another couple, and you were thinking about, tomorrow morning you want to get these 5 things done. Like it's lonely, and people are like, this guy's a psycho. But the reality is it's that obsession I taught when I started this podcast. It's that obsession. It doesn't go away. People that have a burning desire and an obsession, if you apply that to anything consistently over and over again, you will get desirable outcomes with the right energy behind it. So that same obsession that I had with football, I took to law school and I've taken to business. And, there was a point in my life when I'd apologize. I'd be like, oh, I'm a really passionate, intense guy. Sorry, guys. Like, that's just the way. But that's who I am. And that's, part of the reason we're successful is because there is that like constant, like, did we do enough today? Could we have done better? How could we have done it better? What did we learn from it? What's our next step? What's our next growth trajectory? What's our quarter look like? What's our week look like? What's our day look like? What's our month? That constant reevaluation of just like, are we doing enough to get to where we need to go? And when you look at things that you want to accomplish in your life and you put them in front of you and you constantly stare at them and you approach them with that obsessiveness, 100% of the time, Joe, you will get the outcomes you want. It might not get the same timeline that you anticipated, and it might not show up in the same form that you were hoping for.
Yeah.
You will get it. Absolutely. 100% of the time.
Yeah. And look, man, like I said, I'm kind of living some of it too. I've checked off quite a few goals this year with things that, you just apply that energy to, right? Like I was never someone, the simplest one was like even just bench pressing, right? Like that was something where even when I was, in my peak, probably physical athletic career, like I would, put up 185. Like it wasn't really it was something that I always wanted to get better at, but it wasn't really like a baseball driven exercise. So it was like, whatever, but I was always like struggling with it. I thought I had like longer arms, so I couldn't do it. And then I was like, you know what? I'm in my 30s now, but I'd love to like get 3 plates. And we talked about that as one of my random goals that I wanted to achieve. And it took me like, probably only like 3 months to just really like apply a driven energy to that effort when I go to the gym and continue to like, have a baseline of what I work out and then stack more weights on. All of a sudden, I think it was even like before the end of the year of last year, I started putting it up and, I could do it a couple times. And I was like, this is, and this is just applying again, like a focused, intentful, if this is a goal of mine, this is what I have to do to achieve it. And it might happen sooner than you think. It might happen later than you think. But if you just don't quit and keep applying that focus, like you will get there. I never thought I would, really even do something like that, and so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Small example, but
deal flow is the same way, right? You'd asked me earlier, if you early on think that you're going to get a phone call and someone's going to pay you $1 million for bird dog and a HVAC company, like come on, it's never going to happen. Right. You're going to spend a ton of outreach. You're going to get blown off hundreds of times. It's the person that keeps showing up and knows that they're doing the right things and they have good intent and they want to achieve great things in their life that is someday going to be handsomely rewarded for consistently showing up. And you just have to stay in it, knowing that like, hey, this is what I'm focused on. And then all of a sudden they start to hit. And you're like, man, am I glad that I didn't walk away when it got tough. Man, am I glad when I hit 225 on the bench and I thought I was capped at 2 plates that I kept asking if I could do more, right? And I kept going up.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the wisdom. It's always great catching up with you, man. I really appreciate you hopping on here and doing the show with us. And, if people want to reach out after they listen, whether it's, about a real estate deal or about a, even they're trying to sell, their own existing condo, apartment, house, whatever they want to do, where can they find you?
Sure. Instagram's a great place to see a lot of the portfolio. My personal Instagram is elevated.jd. My brokerage is at Elevated Boston, and the development company is at the Elevated Companies. Gym is Muscle and Flow in Milton. So you can find that at Muscle and Flow Milton. But Instagram's probably the best place to see portfolio of work, kind of core products. And you can always shoot me a DM or reach out to me there.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it as always. Thanks, JD.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.